Why is it that the person who walked away from you, ghosted you without warning, and left you drowning in silence, still watches your stories, lingers in your shadow but refuses to send that first text? Why can they post, laugh, and look like they've moved on? Yet something about your silence clearly still haunts them. You've probably been told the lie that if they cared, they'd reach out, that if they were thinking about you, they'd show it. But what if I told you that belief is not only wrong, it's costing you your power? See, this isn't about games, it's about psychology, the kind of invisible internal pressure that works not through noise, but through stillness, through stoicism. The truth is, they're not texting first, not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford to. Emotionally, ego-wise, power-wise. And in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly why. We're breaking down the most misunderstood, under-leveraged tool in dating psychology: no contact. This is more than just ignoring someone. This is transformation, reclamation, a blueprint not for revenge, but for evolution. If you've ever felt trapped in that torturous limbo, checking your phone, wondering if they'll ever reach out, secretly hoping every vibration is them, then stop what you're doing and pay close attention. Because this video will show you what's really happening behind their silence and why your silence is your greatest weapon. We'll unpack the emotional triggers that make them spiral behind the scenes while they pretend everything's fine. We'll expose the subtle power shifts that turn you from the forgotten to the unforgettable. We'll show how stoic relationships aren't built by begging for attention, but by becoming so grounded in your energy that your absence redefines their reality. This isn't about pretending not to care. This is about mastering how you move so that they feel the shift without a single word. And by the end, you'll understand why they can't stop thinking about you, even if their ego won't let them. And show it. So don't skip a second, because what's coming next isn't just insight, it's leverage, it's clarity, and it just might change everything you thought you knew about heartbreak, power, and the art of letting go. Stick around till the end, because part 6 is where we flip the entire script, and it's the moment most people never see coming. Ready? Let's begin. 1. Strategic absence creates emotional pressure. Have you ever noticed how a moment of silence can feel louder than a shout? Strategic absence is not about ghosting, it's deliberate, stoic presence through absence. It's the kind of disappearance that shifts the power balance, forcing someone to confront the void you leave behind. In stoic relationships, silence becomes an active agent, a pressure that compels introspection. When you stop responding impulsively, stop offering your time and attention as if they're free, you're doing more than ignoring. You're sending a message that your energy has value and it's no longer accessible on demand. This isn't avoidance born of weakness. It's precision rooted in self-respect. You're not punishing or plotting revenge. You're reclaiming your emotional economy, challenging the implicit bargain that your availability is unconditional. As days pass without a cheerful "hey" or a reassuring reaction, they begin to feel the emptiness your withdrawal creates. That emptiness is uncomfortable, it's dissonant, because humans crave connection, crave rhythm, crave patterns. When the pattern breaks, the brain flags it as an anomaly, a problem. And in that gap, questions emerge. Did I misjudge them? Did I break it? Did their silence mean more than I realized? You become inescapable in their mind, not by presence, but by absence, because now they're responsible for recalibrating the relationship. In the quiet, they don't text, they don't chase, yet the absence of your attention speaks volumes. They begin to feel the cost of it, and that cost transforms attention into a scarce commodity, which inherently increases its perceived value. It's the opposite of desperation, it's disciplined retreat. This is where the stoicism comes in, not emotional devaluation, but emotional sovereignty. You're showing that your emotional balance relies on your center, not on their validation. The silence proves you're not intertwined with their mood swings. You're independent, self-sustaining, anchored. So naturally, as the silence grows, so does the pressure to fill it, by them, to themselves, and eventually to you. And because this isn't a reactionary strategy, but a conscious rebalancing, you're not begging for reconnection. You're simply living your life so fully and firmly that your absence isn't a passive void, it's powerful presence. In Stoicism, you learn that sometimes the most potent communication comes through what's unsaid. And in relationships, strategic absence is that silent dialogue that shifts power, provokes reflection, and ultimately sets the stage for transformation. Not just of the connection, but of the connection to yourself. Consider how often in life we reach for people not because we truly want them back, but because we panic in the vacuum. That vacuum of silence you're holding, it forces them into their own confrontation with loss. They may not tell you they miss you, but they'll begin obsessing over why you're no longer trying. They'll reread old messages, analyze your timing, look at your social media for clues. Your absence now has gravity. That's the core of Stoic relationships, not to dominate with emotion, but to command presence through restraint. You show up not by chasing, but by not reacting. Your refusal to reach out doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've outgrown the cycle of overgiving and under-receiving. They once believed you'd always be there, always text first, always break the silence. But now, for the first time, you've stopped playing your part, and that silence is terrifying because it suggests something they never expected. You might have truly moved on. When someone assumes they have control, it creates comfort. But when that control is disrupted without warning, it unravels their ego. Strategic absence doesn't ask for their attention, it demands it. And the longer you maintain it, the louder the silence becomes. This is the beauty of Stoicism in relationships. You become the mirror they can't escape, the stillness that reveals their own emotional chaos. Your calm exposes their storm. Your control triggers their uncertainty. And this is why they can't text you first, not because they don't want to, but because your absence has created a psychological standoff they're not prepared to lose. They're waiting to see if you'll blink, but you won't, because you've found something deeper than connection. You've found yourself. 2. The ego trap, pride over connection. They may want to reach out, but ego holds the leash. Imagine wanting to talk to someone with every part of your being, but something inside screams, "Don't you dare." That something is pride, and it's louder than longing for most people. The truth is, they're caught in a silent war with themselves. They're not sleeping well, they're replaying conversations, they're checking your status more than they want to admit, but still, they refuse to send that message. Why? Because texting first would cost them something they think is more important than reconnecting. It would cost them power. In their mind, the first text is a white flag, an admission that they've lost the upper hand. And when pride becomes more valuable than peace, ego becomes the prison. You'd think the pain of silence would push them past the edge. But no. Many people would rather suffer in silence than risk being the one who cared more. It's not because they've moved on. It's because they can't stand the idea that you might not reply, or worse, you might reply with the same indifference they once gave you. That mirror is terrifying. You're not just a person anymore. You're a reflection of the decision they made. And if you've been silent this long, their mind starts playing tricks. Have they forgotten me? Do they even miss me? Are they talking to someone else? And yet, they won't reach out. Because once they disappeared first, or pulled away emotionally, they set a precedent. Reaching out would mean breaking the script. They expected you to chase. They expected you to fold. But you didn't, and now the silence they thought would make you weak is starting to make them spiral. Pride keeps their fingers frozen, But the heart is loud, the heart remembers, the heart aches, and the more stoic you are, the more grounded you stay, the louder that ache becomes. Because you're not giving them what most people give: reaction. You're giving them restraint. And nothing triggers ego like someone who doesn't react the way you predicted. This is the paradox. They're waiting for a sign that it's safe to return without surrendering their pride. But here's the kicker. They left, they went cold, they created the distance, and now they want reconciliation without accountability. That's not emotional maturity. That's emotional avoidance. And in Stoic relationships, emotional avoidance has no currency. It's not enough to miss you. They have to own why they're missing you. But they can't do that if you keep relieving their guilt by reaching out first. Your silence is not just space, it's pressure. It holds up a mirror they can't avoid. And what they see in that mirror is someone who still needs to control the outcome. That control used to come from your emotional response. The late night messages, the heart-on-sleeve texts, the explanations, the justifications, the pleas for clarity. But now you're quiet, and the silence feels dangerous. It's uncharted territory. It's a new version of you they didn't prepare for. Because here's the truth. They may have thought you were weak, emotional, overly available, but you were never weak. You were just attached. And now that attachment is gone. Their grip is slipping. Stoicism isn't about being heartless. It's about being heart-aware, conscious of when your emotions are being exploited, used against you, manipulated. And in that awareness, you choose stillness over panic, clarity over closure, self-respect over self-sacrifice. Now they have to live with the version of you that doesn't break, that doesn't text when triggered, that doesn't panic when ignored. That is terrifying for someone who fed off your need for reassurance. In their mind, you're supposed to be the one who reaches out, the one who chases, the one who doesn't let go. And now that you're not doing any of that, they don't know who you are anymore. That unfamiliarity makes you magnetic, because what's predictable is boring. But what's unknown, that's powerful. And that power triggers a psychological friction they can't explain. It's not that they don't want to break the silence. It's that doing so would require them to acknowledge that they lost emotional leverage. They can't risk that. Not yet. Not while they think there's still a chance you'll give in. But here's the part they didn't expect. You're not playing anymore. You're not even in the arena. You've evolved. You've elevated. You've detached not out of spite, but out of necessity. And now they're the one with questions. They're the one wondering if you've replaced them. If someone else is getting what they took for granted. If they misread your silence as a pause when it was actually an ending. And all the while, their ego screams, "Don't reach out, wait, let them cave first." But they're crumbling. They're folding inside even if their face never shows it. Because silence doesn't just echo, it exposes. And the longer you stay centered, the more off-balance they become. That's Stoicism in real time. Not as a theory, but as a lived experience. You're no longer a participant in the emotional drama. You've become the audience, watching them struggle with a role they thought they controlled. And that distance? It doesn't make them forget you. It makes them obsessed. Not with who you were, but with who you are now, unavailable, unreadable, unmoved. And that curiosity drives them deeper into reflection than any argument, any message, any confession ever could. So, if you've held your silence this long, don't break it now. The pressure is working. The ego is cracking. The mask is slipping. And the moment they realize you're not just silent, but genuinely centered, they'll have no choice but to face what they tried to avoid. You are no longer dependent on their validation. You've become self-validating, self-led, stoic, and in that energy you attract not because you chase, but because you've mastered the art of not needing. That's the difference between emotional reactivity and emotional power. That's the gap between attachment and sovereignty. And that's why they can't text you first, not because the desire isn't there, but because they know the cost of losing to their own pride, and your silence keeps raising the price. If this resonates with you, like the video and comment. Number 1 below if you're feeling this energy, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now, because this journey into Stoic relationships is just getting started. 3. Your silence forces them to reflect. Silence, when it's real, when it's not just an act, but a reflection of your inner stillness, has a strange way of becoming deafening, not to you, but to them. You stop talking, you stop explaining, you stop trying, and what you leave behind is not emptiness, it's space. Space that used to be filled with attention, comfort, validation, and familiarity. And in that space, they're not met with freedom, they're met with their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own echo. Your silence is not just a blank page, it's a mirror, and it reflects everything they tried not to face. Think about it when you were there, always texting, always reacting, always checking in. You unknowingly served as a distraction from their own internal discomfort. You made it easy for them to avoid accountability, to avoid regret, to avoid doubt. Because as long as you were chasing, they didn't have to question whether they made the wrong decision. Your presence gave them certainty. Your attention was the evidence they were still in control. But the moment you stopped, really stopped, that illusion shattered. They expected a pause, not a disappearance. They predicted you'd wait, not grow. And now the person they thought they had power over has gone quiet, completely silent, and in that stillness, they are forced to listen, not to you, but to the narrative they told themselves. Was I right to walk away? Did I matter to them more than I realized? What if I misread everything? And slowly, these questions become louder than any message you could have sent, because now they're not reacting to your actions. They're reacting to your inaction. That's the emotional twist they didn't anticipate. Your restraint becomes their trigger. Your peace becomes their unrest. And all the comfort they felt when they distanced themselves is now replaced with unease, because silence is unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar makes us uncomfortable. Your silence breaks the script. They don't know what's next, and that confusion is more painful than a confrontation. Why? Because in a fight there's clarity, but in silence there's uncertainty. There's no dialogue to interpret, no tone to decode, no closure to cling to, just space. And in that space, they become their own antagonist. That's the brilliance of Stoicism in relationships. It's not just about being quiet, it's about letting the other person feel the weight of their own decisions without offering them emotional shelter. When you go silent with intention, not to punish, but to protect your peace, you shift the responsibility back to them. You say without saying it, this is what it feels like without my energy. Sit with it. And they do. They sit in it. At first they rationalize it. They're just playing a game. They'll reach out eventually. But as time passes and you don't fold, those rationalizations crumble, doubt creeps in, regret takes root, not always visibly. Sometimes it starts subtly, songs that remind them of you, places they visit that feel different now, mutual friends. They avoid because they don't want your name to come up. Your presence, once so consistent it faded into the background, is now haunting in its absence. They start to realize that silence doesn't just mean you've gone quiet. It means you've gone inward. You're not watching their stories. You're not dropping hints. You're not feeding the connection anymore. You've withdrawn completely, and that terrifies them. Because if you're no longer needing them, they have to face a reality they never considered. You might actually be healing. You might actually be happy. And worst of all, you might never return. That possibility drives a wedge into their ego. It creates a storm of uncertainty they can't resolve without reaching out. But reaching out would mean vulnerability. And they're not ready for that. Not yet. So instead, they obsess. They overthink, they stalk silently. They ask mutual friends how you're doing but pretend not to care. They become investigators in their own insecurity, searching for clues that maybe, just maybe, you haven't moved on. But all they find is silence, stillness, mystery. And that's where the reflection deepens, not because they want to reflect, but because your silence gives them no other option. You've stopped being available. You've stopped cushioning their ego. And now their mind is forced to confront everything they avoided. The moment they distanced themselves from you, they created a fork in the path, and for a while they walked forward without looking back. But now the path behind them looks more appealing than the one ahead. But your silence stands like a wall, a silent boundary that they have to cross if they're brave enough. Most aren't, at least not quickly, because silence doesn't just trigger reflection. It demands change, and change requires them to own what they did, that they disappeared, that they took you for granted, that they assumed you'd always be there, but you're not anymore. And that reality forces them to reassess not just you but themselves. What kind of person walks away from something real? What does it say about them that they left someone who only gave? Why didn't they appreciate you when you were right there? Those are the questions they'll wrestle with. At night, in quiet moments, in empty rooms that feel even emptier without your voice. You've become a ghost, not because you died, but because they let you vanish. And now, in their moments of reflection, they realize something terrifying. Your silence is no longer temporary. It's not a timeout. It's a transformation, and if they don't act soon, they might not get another chance. But that urgency, it only hits when your silence is genuine, not performative, not tactical, real, stoic. Your growth has to be authentic. Your peace has to be real. Because if you're just pretending, they'll feel it, and it won't affect them. But when your silence is the byproduct of actual evolution, of deep emotional work, of choosing yourself over old patterns, then every second of your absence feels like a message. A message they can't respond to because it wasn't sent, it was felt. That's the kind of power you hold now, not in words but in energy, in distance, in restraint. And the deeper they reflect, the clearer it becomes. They didn't just lose someone who cared. They lost someone who grew, someone who healed, someone who transcended the need for their attention. And now they're no longer sure if they could ever be enough for this new version of you. That uncertainty, that confusion, that's the price of their silence, and your reward for holding the line. 4. The addiction to attention withdrawal. Attention isn't just affection, it's a drug. And for them, you were the supplier. Every message you sent, every emoji you used, every second you spent listening to them, validating them, showing up for them, it all became their emotional fix. Not necessarily because they were malicious, but because they got used to consuming you. You were the morning caffeine, the late-night comfort, the dopamine hit in the middle of a stressful day. They didn't have to earn your attention anymore. It was just there, always available, always flowing. And what's freely available is almost always undervalued. At first, they adored it, they needed it, they basked in it. But slowly, they stopped noticing it. Not because it stopped mattering, but because the human mind is wired to normalize what is consistent. You became emotional background noise, there, dependable, predictable. And when something is predictable, the brain no longer sees it as novel, exciting, or rare. But the moment that attention disappears, truly disappears, everything changes. You're no longer messaging first, you're not reacting to their posts. You're not watching their stories. You've gone dark, you've gone quiet, you've gone absent. And now the brain, once comfortably addicted to your constant validation, is panicking. The absence of your attention isn't just noticed. It's felt deeply, painfully, confusingly, because now they're not just wondering why you stopped, they're questioning everything. Did you replace them? Are you angry? Are you indifferent or worse? Have you outgrown them? That's the withdrawal, and it's brutal. You see, when someone gets addicted to being chosen every day, and suddenly that validation stops, it's not just your silence they notice. It's the void it leaves behind. A void they didn't expect. A void they don't know how to fill. So they begin checking your profile, watching your stories even if they don't interact, asking mutual friends how you've been, all without texting you. Why? Because the addiction still controls them. But now shame, pride, and fear act as barriers. They can't reach out, but they can't detach either. They're stuck in limbo. But you've pulled back for a reason. Not to manipulate, not to wound, but to rebalance, to detox your own soul from overgiving, to reclaim your attention as a privilege, not a free subscription. And that's what Stoic relationships are built on. Mutual respect for energy, for presence, for intentional connection, not emotional handouts. When you understand that your attention is power, you stop giving it to people who haven't earned it. You stop chasing, stop over-explaining, stop filling the gaps they created. You become the rare one, the one whose time is sacred. And when that happens, the entire dynamic flips. The person who once believed you'd always be there now feels a deep sense of loss, not because you said anything, but because you stopped saying everything. The attention they never thought twice about now becomes the one thing they crave, and because you're no longer feeding their emotional dependence, they're left to wonder if it's already too late. And that wondering, that's the seed of desire. That's the root of obsession. It grows in silence, in mystery, in absence. And here's where your growth becomes your advantage. Because now, while they spiral in withdrawal, you're rising. You're focusing on yourself. You're reading more, healing more, moving with intention. You're no longer trying to be understood. You're busy understanding yourself. And that self-focus radiates. It's felt through the void you left behind. It's sensed through your lack of engagement. It echoes in their mind when they scroll through their phone and realize there's nothing from you, not even a like. That's the new currency, scarcity. Your attention isn't cheap anymore. It's rare, and what's rare is irresistible, especially when someone once had unlimited access to it. It makes them question, what changed? Why doesn't their world revolve around me anymore? Have they really moved on? And maybe they haven't said it, but that question, have I been replaced, haunts them. It lingers in the quiet, in the scroll, in the memory. Because now, they're no longer sure. The script they wrote in their mind where you'd always be waiting, it's been rewritten, and the person holding the pen now is you. You are no longer the dealer of attention. You are the prize. And that shift is what makes people chase. Not because you begged, but because you stopped giving, stopped proving, stopped justifying. You took your power back. And when someone senses they've lost access to what they once took for granted, they start reevaluating everything. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's stoicism in action. Holding space not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with manipulation, but with magnetism. You attract by becoming scarce. Not fake, not cold, just unavailable to the energy that didn't reciprocate yours. So if you're still holding the silence, keep going. You are not being ignored, you are being felt. Deeply, silently, reluctantly. Because now, your absence is louder than your presence ever was. That's the magic of withdrawal. It reveals who really valued the supply. And if you've made it this far in the video, and this message resonates with your current situation, do something powerful right now. Like the video and comment, number 1 below if this energy speaks to you. And if you're serious about mastering your mindset, your peace, and your presence in all your connections, subscribe now. This is the place where stoicism becomes strength and silence becomes your power. 5. Mystery reignites curiosity. There's something haunting about not knowing. It's what keeps people up at night, replaying moments, revisiting conversations, obsessively refreshing profiles, searching for any sign that might explain your silence. When you were predictable, texting every morning, reacting to their posts, being emotionally transparent, there was comfort in that routine. But comfort often breeds complacency. They knew how you felt. They knew you'd be there. You were reliable, and while that consistency may have come from love, it slowly turned into expectation. The emotional puzzle that you once were became too easy to solve. And when a puzzle loses its challenge, it loses its intrigue. But the moment you went silent, something shifted. The game they thought they mastered changed its rules. You're no longer responding the way they predicted. You've become unreadable. And that mystery, that unpredictability, that unfamiliar version of you, it demands attention. Suddenly, you're not the person they thought they knew. You're a blank space, a question mark, an unsolved riddle in their narrative. And the human mind, it hates open loops. When something feels unresolved, it clings to it, loops it, obsesses over it. So now every story you post or don't post, every update or complete absence of one, becomes a clue. They start reading into things that don't exist. A quote on your profile becomes a hidden message. A photo becomes evidence. Your silence becomes suspense, and in that suspense, desire returns, not because of nostalgia, but because of novelty. Because now they don't know what's going on with you, and the imagination always paints louder than reality. They imagine you thriving. They imagine you glowing. They imagine you with someone else, someone who doesn't chase, someone who doesn't beg, someone who doesn't make them feel like the center of the universe. And that image burns. It shakes the foundation they stood on. Because if you've become the kind of person who no longer reacts, who no longer pleads for their presence, then maybe they were never as indispensable as they thought. And that thought, that fear, is where curiosity turns into compulsion. You've become the exception to their pattern. They've had people chase them before. They've had exes reach out, try again, fall apart in the silence. But not you. You disappeared not as a tactic, but as a transformation. You didn't go quiet to provoke a reaction. You went quiet because you outgrew the noise, and that's what makes you magnetic. Real mystery isn't created by playing games. It's created by evolving so deeply that your old self becomes unrecognizable. And now they're searching for signs of the old you, but that version doesn't exist anymore. You don't post the same. You don't comment. You don't linger. You don't flinch. You've become centered, still, whole. And in that stillness, they lose their sense of control. They can't manipulate silence. They can't decode calm. They can't predict someone who no longer needs validation, and so their obsession deepens, not with your attention, but with the loss of it. They thought they knew how this story ended, but now they're watching a sequel they didn't write. You're no longer an open book. You're a locked journal, and every day they don't hear from you, every day you don't break the silence, the tension builds. That's the power of becoming a mystery. When someone has full access to you and loses it, it's not the access they miss, it's the certainty. And certainty is the foundation of control. Once it's gone, they're left scrambling, wondering, doubting, hoping. And here's where the magic happens. The more you lean into your growth, the more they spiral into confusion. Because they assumed you needed them. They assumed your silence was temporary, but now they're not sure, because you're not just silent, you're different, you're focused, you're not bitter, you're building. And that building, it's louder than any text you could have sent. It speaks volumes, because the truth is, people are not obsessed with closure, they're obsessed with control. And when someone they thought they had power over becomes unreadable, unknowable, untouchable, it breaks something inside them. Not their heart, but their illusion. The illusion that they mattered more. The illusion that you'd always chase. The illusion that they'd always be the one in control. But now the roles have reversed, not because you tried to flip the script, but because you stopped performing altogether. You left the stage, and now they're staring at the empty spotlight, waiting, hoping, wondering if you'll return. But you won't, because you've realized that your energy is too valuable to be spent on people who needed to lose you to recognize you. You've stepped into the unknown, and in doing so, you've become the thing that draws them in, not because of what you give, but because of what you no longer offer. Mystery isn't a mask, it's a mirror, and your silence is forcing them to see what they tried to avoid, that the version of you they thought they knew is gone, and in their search to find that version again, they might just fall in love with the one you've become, but it may already be too late. 6. Your growth shifts the dynamic. There's a moment that happens, not always loud, not always obvious, when they realize the game has changed. That moment comes when they feel your absence not as silence, but as elevation. You're no longer lingering, no longer signaling, no longer orbiting around their emotional weather. You've shifted, quietly, powerfully. Not out of spite, but because something inside you evolved, and that evolution is not something they can ignore, even if they don't admit it. See, they remember who you were, the one who overextended, over-explained, over-apologized for caring, the one who waited for texts, hoped for calls, read into every silence like it was a sentence. But that version of you no longer exists, and the moment they sense that, truly sense it, they panic, not because you changed, but because they didn't expect you to, because they built their control on the belief that your feelings for them would be permanent, unwavering, guaranteed. And now, suddenly you're a variable. You're no longer emotionally predictable, and that unpredictability is what rewrites the entire dynamic. You're not bitter, you're not cold. You're simply uninterested in proving your worth to someone who questioned it. That subtle shift from needing to be chosen to choosing yourself shakes their foundation. They didn't think you'd grow, they thought you'd wait, but you didn't. You healed, you matured. You started showing up for yourself in ways you used to reserve only for them. You stopped checking your phone as much. You stopped replaying the past. You stopped needing answers. And that stopping, that quiet, consistent detachment is what echoes in their mind when they try to sleep. Because now they don't know if you'd even respond if they did reach out. And that uncertainty drives them mad. You've become the one who's no longer accessible. No longer waiting, no longer validating. You've become the standard, and that's something they didn't prepare for. Because the growth they ignored is now the growth they crave. They want to know what changed. They want to know who you're becoming. But more than that, they want to know if there's still a place for them in this new version of your life. And the truth is, there might not be, because your growth wasn't for them, it was for you. It was to reclaim your power, your peace, your presence. And once you begin evolving for yourself, you stop accepting energy that isn't in alignment. You stop chasing clarity from people who only ever gave confusion. You stop romanticizing the past and start building a future that reflects your worth. And that shift doesn't just change the dynamic, it changes the entire narrative. You're no longer the heartbroken, you're the healed. You're no longer waiting for closure, you've become the closure. And in that reality, you find something they never gave you: freedom. Freedom from overthinking, freedom from emotional instability, freedom from the cycle of proving your value to someone who didn't see it until you stopped offering it. And now they're the one questioning, they're the one unsettled, because you didn't just move on, you leveled up. And leveling up doesn't require noise. It's quiet, stoic, grounded. It's the shift that happens when you stop reacting and start realigning, and the more you grow, the less recognizable you become to the version of them that once believed they held the upper hand. That's the beauty of stoicism in relationships. Not that you become indifferent, but that you become deeply aligned with what deserves your energy. And in that alignment, they can feel the distance, not just physical, energetic, emotional, spiritual. They can feel that the connection isn't open access anymore. It's exclusive, selective, earned. And if they ever want to re-enter your world, it won't be on the same terms. Because the person they ghosted is gone. The person they manipulated is gone. The person they took for granted is gone. And what's left is someone who doesn't beg to be seen. Someone who's no longer available to inconsistency. Someone who doesn't shrink to be loved. You're that someone now. And if they do come back, they'll have to face a reality they're not used to. A version of you who holds the power not through control, but through calm, through silence, through growth. You're not looking for validation anymore. You are the validation. And if that energy resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video and comment number 1 if this message spoke to your experience. And if you haven't already, subscribe now, because this isn't just a conversation. This is a movement, a reclamation of self, a return to emotional sovereignty. And you, just by watching, are already part of it. So now you understand it. The silence, the withdrawal, the unread messages, the unreturned glances, none of it is random. It's all a response to something much deeper. It's the result of power being rebalanced, of energy being reclaimed, of self-worth finally becoming non-negotiable. When you stopped chasing, you didn't just create space, you created pressure. You created a void that forced them to look inward and confront the part of themselves that relied on your validation to feel secure. And that part, it's terrified. Because now they know that the version of you who waited, who hoped, who reached out is gone. Not bitter, not angry, just evolved. And evolution is the one thing that can't be reversed. Once you grow, you see the world differently. You see them differently. You stop romanticizing what once wounded you. You stop hoping that the person who hurt you will also be the one to heal you. You stop reaching back, and in that stillness, you find your real strength. Because what you've built now isn't a wall, it's a boundary. What you've created isn't distance, it's discernment. And that discernment protects your peace like armor. It shields you from the inconsistency you once tolerated. It safeguards your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth. You no longer throw yourself into the fire just to feel needed. You no longer over-explain your worth. You no longer abandon yourself in the name of being chosen, because now you've chosen you, and that choice is everything. It's what separates the stoic from the desperate, the elevated from the emotionally reactive. It's what takes you from heartbreak to healing, without needing revenge, without needing validation, without needing them to understand. Because they don't need to understand. They need to feel the loss, not to hurt them, not to get even, but so they can finally confront the truth they've been avoiding, that losing you wasn't an accident. It was a consequence of taking you for granted, of misunderstanding silence as weakness, of thinking love meant availability without limits. But now your love comes with requirements, presence, respect, honesty, consistency. Not perfection, but effort. And if they can't meet that, then your silence will continue to speak for you. Because silence isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of self-respect. It's the boundary between what was and what's possible. It's the proof that you are no longer accessible to people who only value you when you're gone. And that's the shift they never saw coming. They thought you'd always be there. But now you've become the one who walks away. Not in anger, but in alignment. Not to punish, but to protect. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. And in that care, you reclaimed your power. Power that was never truly lost, only misplaced in the hands of someone who didn't know how to hold it. Now, it's yours again. And you're using it not to manipulate, not to control, but to center yourself. to elevate your path, to walk forward without looking back, because the person you're becoming, they don't chase, they don't beg, they don't need someone else to complete them. They are whole, steady, grounded, and that energy, the quiet, powerful certainty that radiates from within, is what will echo long after the silence has ended. They may not say it, they may never reach out, or maybe they will. Maybe they'll try to re-enter your life once they realize what they lost. But either way, you've already won. Because this wasn't about getting them back. It was about getting yourself back. And now that you have, the story changes. You don't just survive heartbreak, you transcend it. You don't just recover, you rebuild. And what you're building now isn't just a better version of yourself. It's a life where your peace is protected, your energy is sacred, and your presence is chosen, not begged for. That is the essence of Stoic relationships. That is the truth behind no contact. And that is the power of silence, not as punishment, but as liberation. You didn't lose them, you found you. And in that finding, you created something that no one can ever take again. Clarity, freedom, power, and most of all, peace.